My name is Alyssa, and the day I walked into that courtroom, my mother rolled her eyes like I was the villain in her story. She had no idea the judge recognized me, not as her daughter, but as the granddaughter of the man who raised me, the man she abandoned. What followed wasn't just a trial over inheritance. It was a reckoning decades in the making. A fight between blood and loyalty, greed and love, justice and revenge. And when the truth came out, no one left that courtroom the same. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories. The moment I stepped into that courtroom, my mother rolled her eyes like she was allergic to my existence. Not the subtle kind of eye roll either. The dramatic, exaggerated kind that screamed, "Here we go again," as if I was the one ruining her perfect little victim performance. But then something unexpected happened. Judge Brennan froze. His pen paused midair, his eyes flicking from the paperwork to my face, and I watched it hit him. Recognition. Like a ghost from a past life had just walked into his courtroom. "Wait," he said slowly, setting down his pen. "These allegations are against you?" The silence that followed could have cracked glass. My parents had no idea who I really was, and honestly, that was my favorite part. Before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back a few months, because that's where this story really began. My grandfather, Judge William Parker, passed away. 40 years on the Supreme Court bench. The man was a legend. But to me, he was simply Grandpa, the only person who ever truly raised me, while my parents were off living their glamorous, self-absorbed lives pretending I didn't exist. His funeral was enormous. Every judge, attorney, and political figure in the state showed up. Cameras, speeches, black cars lined up around the block. I stood at the podium and delivered the eulogy. Steady voice, controlled tone, just like Grandpa taught me. Meanwhile, my parents, Diane and Scott Morrison, sat in the back row, arrived late, left early, classic. I hadn't seen them in over a decade. Not since my 18th birthday, the day my grandmother passed away. They stayed for 90 minutes, posed for sympathy, and vanished again. After Grandma Helen died, it was just Grandpa and me. He was 72 then, still sharp, still working, still giving me everything I needed to become someone. My parents? They'd been gone long before that. My mother got pregnant at 17 and decided motherhood didn't fit her aesthetic. My father, a rising hockey player with dreams of fame, didn't think a baby matched his career goals. So they did what selfish people do best. They dropped me off at my grandparents' doorstep when I was 3 months old and never looked back. Oh, they visited once in a while, holidays, maybe birthdays, just enough to ease their guilt. Mom would show up wearing designer coats, kiss the air near my cheek, and spend the entire visit criticizing how Grandma raised me. "Too soft," she'd say. "Too emotional." Meanwhile, my father rarely came inside at all. Grandpa couldn't stand him, and the feeling was mutual. But Grandpa, he made sure I never felt like I was missing anything. He didn't talk much about my parents, but he always made space for them, like watching hockey just so I'd see my father on TV. He didn't care for the sport. He just wanted me to know where I came from. Still, the truth is, I never missed them. Not really. Grandma and Grandpa gave me everything that mattered. Consistency, warmth, love that didn't disappear when things got inconvenient. They were at every school play, every soccer game, every science fair. The kind of love that shows up, even when no one's watching. When Grandma died suddenly from a stroke, my world collapsed. I was 18, just about to start college, when the call came. I thought Grandpa would crumble too, but instead, he became unshakable, strong for both of us. And through that darkness, something changed between us. He started talking, really talking, about his work, about justice, about what it means to hold power responsibly. That's when I decided to follow in his footsteps. I worked harder than I ever had. Graduated top of my class in law school. Grandpa was there, front row, beaming like I'd just won the Nobel Prize. My parents sent a card, a generic one. With Grandpa's influence and my own grit, I landed a job as a prosecutor. I worked my way up, fast. Turns out I had a talent for uncovering the truth, even when people tried to bury it deep. By 30, I was handling cases that made headlines: corporate fraud, political corruption, embezzlement. My parents had no clue. They probably thought I was still filing paperwork in some dusty office. When Grandpa retired at 77, he said he'd finally done enough. But I knew the real reason. He wanted time. Time to live. Time with me. We had dinner every Sunday, no excuses, no cancellations. He'd teach me everything that wasn't in the textbooks. How to read a jury, how to listen when people lie, how to hold on to your integrity when everyone around you is selling theirs. Then one morning, he didn't wake up. Peaceful, they said. I didn't feel peace. I felt hollow, like my compass had stopped pointing north. Still, I showed up for him one last time. The will reading happened a week later. I expected maybe his watch, a few keepsakes, some old law books. Instead, I got everything. The house, the investments, the savings, the life insurance, $3 million in total. Everything he spent a lifetime building, he left to me. But there was something else, a sealed letter. My dearest Alyssa, it began, you are reading this because I am gone, but my love for you remains. You are my greatest joy. I leave you everything because you earned it, not by blood, but by heart. Your parents made their choice long ago. This is mine. Be strong, my girl. I didn't cry right away. It hit later. Not grief, but gratitude, validation. Then the attorney handed me another envelope. Documentation. Records showing Grandpa had paid my mother $3,000 every month since I was born, over $800,000 total. Proof of their greed disguised as absence. Letters, emails, messages, receipts of their neglect. Your grandfather wanted you armed, the attorney explained. He anticipated they'd contest this. And sure enough, 30 days later, my lawyer called. My parents had filed a lawsuit claiming undue influence, that Grandpa wasn't of sound mind. That I manipulated an old man into cutting them out. I actually laughed. I was in court, mid-hearing on a securities fraud case when I got the message. The irony was poetic. They had no idea who they were messing with. No idea I'd spent the last decade prosecuting criminals exactly like them. They assumed I was still the little girl they abandoned. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. And they definitely didn't know who the presiding judge was. Marcus Brennan, Grandpa's former clerk, now one of the most respected judges in the state, which brings us back to that courtroom. The moment of recognition. Brennan knew exactly who I was. He knew my history, my ethics, my reputation, and he knew exactly who they were too. My mother's attorney, a slick-talking man named Richard Palmer, stood up. Your Honor, he began, before we proceed, I should disclose that you had a professional relationship with Judge Parker. If either party objects, Judge Brennan said evenly, speak now. Palmer whispered frantically with my parents. Diane's eyes darted toward me. Scott crossed his arms, looking irritated. Finally, Palmer straightened. No objection, Your Honor. Big mistake, Brennan nodded slowly. Then let's proceed. And just like that, the stage was set. Palmer cleared his throat and strutted toward the jury box like he was starring in a courtroom drama. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, gesturing theatrically, this is a case of manipulation, of deception, of a young woman taking advantage of an elderly man in his declining years. He turned toward me, fake sympathy dripping from his voice. My clients, Diane and Scott Morrison, only seek fairness. Their father, Judge Parker, was an honorable man, yes, but he was also old, frail, and easily influenced by someone he loved dearly, someone who used that love for personal gain. He paused dramatically. We intend to prove that Alyssa Morrison coerced her grandfather into rewriting his will, isolating him from his family and seizing his estate. This isn't about greed. This is about justice. Justice. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. When it was my turn, my attorney Rachel Hart stood and calmly approached the bench. Rachel wasn't theatrical. She didn't posture or shout. She simply let the facts do the work. Your Honor, she began, my client doesn't need sympathy. She needs the truth recognized. For 31 years, Alyssa Morrison's parents were absent by choice. We have letters, bank records, and testimony to prove that Judge Parker's decision was deliberate, informed, and deeply personal. He wasn't manipulated. He was disappointed. Judge Brennan's gaze flickered briefly in my direction, then back to the papers before him. Proceed. As testimony began, I watched my parents sit there, two strangers pretending to be victims. My mother wore black, as if mourning a relationship that had never existed. My father fidgeted with his cufflinks, pretending not to notice me. I remembered being 5, waiting by the window with my backpack on, hoping they'd come take me to the zoo. They never showed. Grandpa did. He always did. Now they were claiming they deserved a piece of the man's legacy? No, not this time. The first witness was Mr. Daniels, Grandpa's financial advisor for over 30 years. Calm, composed, he explained how every transaction, every wire transfer, every monthly payment had been authorized and recorded. Judge Parker was meticulous, he said. He knew exactly what he wanted. He discussed his estate plan repeatedly. He made it clear that Ms. Morrison was his sole heir. Palmer tried to shake him. So, you're saying this 87-year-old man, grieving the loss of his wife, made these decisions entirely on his own? Yes, Daniel said simply. Grieving doesn't mean incapable. It means human. Palmer looked irritated. And Ms. Morrison never influenced these decisions? Daniel smiled slightly. She influenced him by being a decent granddaughter. If that's a crime, we're in trouble. The courtroom chuckled softly. Next came the caregiver, Maria Lopez, who'd taken care of Grandpa in his last 2 years. She testified how my parents never visited once. Not even when he was in the hospital, she said. But Alyssa, she was there every Sunday. She cooked for him, read to him, helped him with his medications. He'd always say, "She's my pride and joy." When she said that, I caught my mother's jaw tighten. Palmer tried to twist it, of course. Ms. Lopez, you were paid for your services, correct? Yes, sir. So, your relationship with Judge Parker was professional, not personal? Maria frowned. When you watch someone fade away and hold their hand through it, it becomes personal. That shut him up. As the hearing continued, it became clear that my parents' case was collapsing. Their only strategy was painting me as manipulative and Grandpa as senile. But every witness, every document, every timeline proved the opposite. Grandpa's health records showed mental sharpness until the end. His emails were detailed, rational, purposeful. Still, I sat there, silent, listening to my mother pretend to cry on the stand. I tried to reconnect, she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. But Alyssa, she shut me out. She wouldn't let me talk to my father. She turned him against me. Lie after lie. Rachel didn't rush her cross-examination. She walked slowly to the witness stand, holding a thick folder. Mrs. Morrison, she began evenly, you claim you attempted to reconnect with your father in the last 5 years of his life. Is that correct? Yes, my mother said softly. Many times. Rachel opened the folder and lifted a stack of papers. Then perhaps you can explain why there are no calls, no emails, no visits recorded during that time. In fact, the last verified contact we can find between you and your father was a single text message 8 years ago, asking for money. The courtroom went quiet. Rachel continued, Would you like me to read it aloud? Diane's lips trembled. No, that won't be necessary. Understood. Rachel placed the paper down carefully. One more question. Are you aware your father continued sending you $3,000 a month for over 2 decades? Diane blinked. Yes, but did you ever visit him to say thank you? Silence. Did you ever return a call, attend his retirement ceremony, or even send him a birthday card? Her voice cracked. I was busy. Busy, Rachel repeated, her tone flat. Too busy to see your father, but not too busy to file a lawsuit against his granddaughter for honoring him. Even Judge Brennan had to look down to hide his expression. When my father took the stand, I expected anger. What I didn't expect was arrogance. He spoke like a man who'd convinced himself the world owed him something. I didn't need William Parker's approval, he said coolly. He didn't respect me because I chose my own path. Rachel tilted her head. Your own path, Mr. Morrison? You mean the one funded by his checks? Scott scowled. That's irrelevant. On the contrary, she said, it's extremely relevant. Your entire career, your investments, your path, as you call it, was financed by the man you're now defaming. You didn't build your life alone. You built it on his generosity. He shifted uncomfortably. And when he stopped sending money, you filed for bankruptcy, correct? He hesitated. Yes. So when you realized he left everything to your daughter, it wasn't grief that brought you here. It was financial desperation. Scott's jaw clenched. That's not true. But the silence in the courtroom said otherwise. As the trial days stretched on, I found myself thinking back to Grandpa's lessons. The law isn't about emotion, he'd said once. It's about truth. But truth always has emotion attached to it. You can't separate the two. You can only balance them. He was right. I could have sat there cold, detached, unfeeling. But when Rachel rested our case, I looked straight at Judge Brennan and asked to speak. He hesitated, then nodded. Briefly. I stood and faced the court. My voice was steady, calm, like I'd practiced in my mind 1,000 times. My parents want the court to believe I manipulated a man who raised me when they wouldn't. But the truth is simpler. Judge Parker wasn't weak. He wasn't confused. He was disappointed. Disappointed that the people who should have loved him most only remembered him when his money was involved. I didn't take anything from them. They gave it away. Every year, every missed visit, every excuse, every empty promise. I turned toward my mother. You talk about love, Mom, but love shows up. It doesn't wait until it's profitable. Judge Brennan cleared his throat softly. Thank you, Ms. Morrison. That's enough. I sat down. My heart raced, but it felt right. Grandpa would have approved. The closing arguments came fast after that. Palmer tried one last emotional plea, but even he sounded exhausted. Family, he said, deserves forgiveness. Rachel rose next. Family, she countered, deserves accountability. When the verdict finally came, Judge Brennan's tone was firm, decisive. After reviewing the evidence, testimony, and documentation, it's clear that Judge William Parker was of sound mind when he drafted his will. His decisions were deliberate and well-informed. The court finds no evidence of undue influence. The estate will remain in full to Ms. Alyssa Morrison. My mother gasped. My father muttered something under his breath. I just closed my eyes. It was over. But I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about letting people see what they lost and knowing they can never get it back. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted my name. But all I could think about was Grandpa's voice, calm and steady. Justice isn't about vengeance, Alyssa. It's about restoration. I smiled faintly. Restoration accomplished. Still, this story wasn't finished yet. Because something unexpected happened a week later. Something that made the entire courtroom victory look small in comparison. A week after the verdict, I thought things were finally settling. The media noise had quieted down, the estate paperwork was nearly complete, and I'd begun to breathe again. The house was mine now. The same white brick home with ivy-covered walls where I'd spent every summer morning making pancakes with Grandpa and every winter night studying case law by the fireplace. It smelled like coffee and old books and safety. For the first time in months, I could walk through the halls without feeling like the ghosts of legal battles were following me. But peace, it turned out, wasn't ready to stay. On the 8th night after the ruling, I came home to find the mailbox overflowing. Letters, packages, even flowers. Most were from colleagues, friends, people who'd read about the case and admired how I'd stood my ground. Yet tucked among them was a thin envelope with my mother's handwriting. My stomach turned. I sat at Grandpa's old desk, unfolded the letter, and read, Alyssa, you may think you've won, but you've destroyed what's left of this family. You humiliated us. You paraded our private pain in front of the entire world. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. I hope that money keeps you warm at night, because you've lost everything else. Mom. I let the words sit there for a long moment, staring at the handwriting that had written me out of her life decades ago. Then I smiled, a small, bitter, knowing smile. The difference between us had never been clearer. She measured love in inheritance, I measured it in presence. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into one of Grandpa's law books, and whispered, You were right, Grandpa. Some people never learn. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to my parents' neighborhood, an upscale suburban enclave of manicured lawns, stone fountains, and facades that hid decay underneath. Their house was a 2-story testament to denial. For years, they'd lived on image, not income, always pretending they were better off than they were. When I pulled into the driveway, my mother was standing outside arguing with a landscaper. She froze when she saw me step out of the car. Alyssa, she said flatly, like the name tasted sour. Mom. I nodded. We need to talk. Scott appeared at the door behind her, phone in hand, expression wary. If this is about money, it's not, I cut in. You already tried that in court. He scoffed. You think that courtroom stunt made you some kind of hero? No, I said evenly. It made me the one person who finally stopped enabling you. Diane crossed her arms. You have no idea what it's like to struggle, Alyssa. Your grandfather spoiled you. We didn't have anyone to take care of us. I tilted my head. Really? You had him sending you $3,000 a month for 20 years. You had opportunities. You had a choice every single day to show up, to call, to be parents. You just didn't. Her lip trembled, but her pride wouldn't let her show it. You're ungrateful, she hissed. We gave you life. And Grandpa gave me everything that made it worth living, I replied quietly. I reached into my bag and handed her a small envelope, sealed, embossed with the Parker family crest. Her eyes flickered with suspicion. What is this? Something Grandpa wrote for you, I said. He asked me to deliver it after everything was settled. Her fingers shook slightly as she tore it open. Inside was a short, handwritten note. Diane, if you're reading this, my faith in redemption has outlasted my years. I loved you once without condition, but love without effort dies quietly. You've spent your life running from responsibility and blaming everyone who tried to hold you accountable. This is not punishment, it's consequence. If you wish to honor me, don't chase money, chase meaning, and start with your daughter. Dad. Diane read it twice, her expression cracking, then folding into something that almost looked like grief. But she quickly masked it with indignation. He always loved you more, she muttered. No, I said softly. He just loved you longer. I turned and walked away before she could respond. Some endings don't need dramatic exits, they just need finality. Back at the house, I started sorting through Grandpa's office. Boxes of old cases, handwritten notes, letters from judges across the country. Tucked inside one folder, I found something unexpected. A sealed envelope addressed to the Parker Foundation for Justice. There was a short note in his handwriting. For Alyssa to complete. I unfolded the attached documents. He'd started the paperwork to establish a nonprofit organization, one meant to provide scholarships for underprivileged law students and fund legal aid for those who couldn't afford representation. It was his unfinished dream. That night, I stayed up until dawn finishing it. I named it the Parker Legacy Foundation. The next week, I filed the papers, funded it with part of the inheritance, and set its mission exactly as Grandpa would have wanted, to protect integrity and justice, and give opportunity to those who have none. When the foundation launched, I invited Judge Brennan to the inaugural dinner. He showed up in a navy suit, smiling like a proud mentor. Your grandfather would be proud, he said quietly. I hope so, I replied. He always believed justice should live outside the courtroom, too. Brennan nodded. You've done more than honor him. You've surpassed him. I smiled, but part of me still carried that ache, the kind that comes from loving someone who isn't there to see what you've become. Later that night, I walked out to the garden Grandpa and Grandma had planted together. The same rose bushes Grandma once tended, the same tulips she never finished planting the day she died. I knelt down and replanted the empty patch, pressing the bulbs gently into the soil. Every promise kept, I whispered. Every lesson learned. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. 3 months later, I was in the middle of preparing for a corruption trial when a knock came at my office door. Rachel poked her head in. You're going to want to see this, she said, handing me a letter. It was from a law firm representing my parents. I braced myself, but this time it wasn't another lawsuit. It was a notice of foreclosure. They'd lost their house. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling nothing. No joy, no pity, just inevitability. The same inevitability that follows choices made decades ago. A week later, I received another letter, this time handwritten from my mother. Alyssa, I don't expect forgiveness. You were right about everything. We lost the house. Scott's gone. Moved to another state. I've started working part-time at a community center. For the first time, I understand what Dad meant about chasing meaning. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. Diane. I read it twice, folded it gently, and placed it next to Grandpa's letter in the same drawer. Forgiveness wasn't instant, it rarely is, but maybe this was the beginning of something less bitter. Weeks passed. The foundation grew quickly, donations pouring in, young law students writing letters about how it changed their futures. Every time I read their words, I felt Grandpa beside me, his quiet pride echoing through every decision I made. One evening after a long day in court, I stopped by the park across from the courthouse. The sunset painted everything gold and crimson, the same colors as the tulips in Grandma's garden. I sat on the bench, breathing in the stillness, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I felt peace. Not the fragile kind, but the kind that stays. Justice wasn't about winning the will. It was about restoring balance. About proving that love, loyalty, and integrity still mattered in a world that often forgot them. I opened my phone and started recording a short voice note for the Foundation's upcoming video, a tradition Grandpa would have teased me about, but secretly loved. "My name is Alyssa," I said softly. "And if there's one thing my grandfather taught me, it's that family isn't defined by blood or last names. It's defined by who shows up when no one else will. Justice starts there, with showing up." I looked up at the sunset and smiled. If you're watching this, tell me where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of real courage, real justice, and real love. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge, I paused, letting the moment breathe, is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't. The screen faded to black, and that was the end. Not the explosive kind of revenge you see in movies, but the quiet, steady kind that rewrites a legacy. Grandpa's voice lived on, not through rulings or verdicts, but through me. Through every person the Foundation would help. Through every seed planted in that old garden. The world had seen a courtroom battle. But for me, it had been something far deeper, an inheritance of strength, love, and purpose that no one could ever contest.